Michael Rodriguez had driven for Uber for 3 years. Every night the same routine: pick up passengers, smile politely, collect his fare. Nobody looked twice at the quiet 58-year-old man behind the wheel. Nobody asked questions. Nobody knew that the man who carefully navigated Chicago's streets had once commanded special operations that never made the news. Nobody knew that the gentle voice saying, "Thank you for riding," had once given orders that changed the course of battles. Tonight, a drunk passenger would make one critical mistake. He would assume that silence meant weakness. He was about to learn how wrong he was.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing.
The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. when Michael Rodriguez accepted the ping. 3 more hours until he could call it a night. His back ached from sitting, and his eyes burned from the glare of headlights on wet pavement. Chicago in November was always like this: cold, damp, and unforgiving. The pickup location was the Brass Monkey, a dive bar in River North known for trouble. Michael had picked up passengers there before, usually drunk businessmen trying to get home to the suburbs, sometimes college kids who'd pushed their limits. Occasionally, someone looking for a fight they couldn't win. He pulled up to the curb and waited. Through the bar's dirty windows, he could see the chaos inside: bodies pressed together, drinks spilling, voices raised in alcohol-fueled celebration or argument. Friday night in full swing. The rear door jerked open with more force than necessary. A large man threw himself into the back seat, bringing with him the smell of whiskey, sweat, and cologne applied too heavily. Michael glanced in the rearview mirror, making his professional assessment in seconds. Troy Rodriguez. The app displayed the name along with a 3.2-star rating. Low enough to be concerning, high enough that the system hadn't banned him yet. The man was in his early 30s, built like someone who'd spent serious time in a gym. His face was flushed with alcohol and something else. Anger, maybe. Or entitlement. Michael kept his voice neutral and professional. Years of training made it automatic. Never escalate, always de-escalate. Read the situation. Stay 3 steps ahead. "Good evening, Troy?" "Yeah, that's me. Let's go." The words came out slurred but aggressive. Troy was already pulling out his phone, fingers jabbing at the screen with unnecessary force. Michael checked the destination, an address in Lincoln Park, about 20 minutes away at this time of night. Plenty of time for a situation to develop. He pulled up to the curb smoothly, keeping his movements calm and predictable. For the first 5 minutes, Troy was absorbed in his phone, muttering under his breath. Michael could hear fragments, complaints about his boss, angry comments about someone named Jennifer, threats about what he'd do on Monday. Standard drunk passenger material. Then Troy looked up and seemed to notice Michael for the first time. Really notice him. The kind of look predators give when sizing up prey. "How old are you, man?" Michael kept his eyes on the road. 58. 58, Troy laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "Man, and you're driving Uber? Man, that's sad." "What happened? Wife leave you? Lost your real job? Couldn't hack it in the real world?" Michael said nothing. Silence was often the best response. Let them talk themselves out. Let them feel like they'd made their point. Then get them to their destination and move on. But Troy wasn't the type to let silence stand. He leaned forward, his breath hot and sour as it drifted toward the front seat. "I'm talking to you, old man. Show some respect when a customer asks you a question." "I'm just focused on getting you home safely," Michael replied, his tone still perfectly even. No emotion, no challenge, nothing to grab onto. "Home safely," Troy mimicked Michael's voice in a mocking falsetto. "You think you're better than me? Think you're some kind of professional? You're a fucking Uber driver, man. You're nobody. You're the guy who couldn't make it, driving around people who actually succeeded in life." Michael made a turn, signaling carefully, obeying every traffic law. The streets were quieter now, fewer cars. The buildings grew darker.
They were moving away from the busy downtown area into the neighborhoods. Troy pulled out a small bottle from his jacket pocket, vodka. He took a long drink, not bothering to hide it. "Hey, want some?" He shoved the bottle toward the front seat. "Oh wait, you're on duty, right? Gotta be a good little driver. Probably haven't had fun in years. Probably go home to some empty apartment and watch TV until you fall asleep in your chair." The bottle suddenly flew past Michael's head and smashed against the passenger window. Glass and vodka sprayed across the interior. Michael's hands remained steady on the wheel. His breathing didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, an almost imperceptible straightening. "That was an accident," Troy said, his voice now carrying an edge of challenge. He was testing, seeing what Michael would do. "What are you gonna do about it? Gonna cry? Gonna report me? Go ahead, see what happens." Michael pulled the car to the side of the road and stopped. He turned in his seat to face Troy directly for the first time. His eyes, which had seemed tired and gentle before, now held something different. Not anger. Something colder. More controlled. "Sir, I'm going to have to end this trip. I'll cancel it on my end. No charge, but you need to get out of my car." Troy's face flushed darker. "I'm not getting out until I get where I'm going. You're going to drive me, old man, and you're going to keep your mouth shut about the bottle, or I'm going to make your life very difficult. You understand? I know people. I can get you banned from every ride-share platform in the city. I can make sure you never work again. Please get out of the car. Make me." Michael held Troy's gaze for 3 long seconds. Then he turned back around, put the car in drive, and continued toward the destination. Sometimes retreat was the wiser choice. Get the passenger to their destination, end the interaction, report it later. Stay safe. But Troy had tasted blood now. He'd found someone he could push around, and the alcohol in his system killed whatever judgment he might have had sober. "You're real quiet now. Finally figuring out you fucked with the wrong guy? I used to play football, man. Linebacker. Almost went pro. You know what that means? It means I know how to hit. It means I'm not afraid of anything, especially not some old man who drives a fucking Camry for a living." Michael maintained his speed, following the GPS instructions with perfect precision. The headlights behind them maintained their distance, coordinated, waiting for the right moment. "My boys, they're gonna love this. We get bored sometimes, you know. Friday night, had some drinks, looking for entertainment. And you're gonna be tonight's entertainment, old man. Nothing personal, just teaching you a lesson about respect." The GPS announced their destination was in 1 mile. Michael could see it ahead, Troy's building, but the route passed by several empty lots, perfect ambush points. The vehicles behind them accelerated slightly, closing the gap. Michael's hands remained steady on the wheel, but his mind was somewhere else now. Not in the car with a drunk bully, not in Chicago on a cold November night. He was in Fallujah, 2006. He was in Kandahar, 2009. He was in a dozen other places where staying calm under threat meant the difference between life and death. "Hey, pull over here." Troy pointed to a rest area coming up on the right, a small parking lot with a closed gas station and a few dim streetlights. "My buddy's car's acting up. We're going to switch passengers." "Your destination is," I said, "pull over here." Troy's voice rose to a shout. "Now!" Michael signaled and turned into the rest area. The 2 vehicles behind them followed immediately, boxing him in before he'd even come to a complete stop. This was it. The moment where everything would either de-escalate or explode. 5 doors opened simultaneously. Troy climbed out of the back seat, suddenly steadier on his feet than he'd appeared before. The alcohol hadn't disappeared, but adrenaline was sharpening him now. From the 2 following vehicles emerged 4 more men, all matching Troy's physical profile. Big, aggressive, ready for violence. Michael remained in the driver's seat, door locked, hands visible on the wheel. Through his side window, he watched Troy and his friend gather, talking and laughing. One of them picked up a tire iron from his trunk, another pulled on gloves. They were taking their time, enjoying the anticipation.
Michael reached for his phone with movements so calm they seemed almost disconnected from the threat surrounding him. His fingers moved across the screen with precision of someone who'd performed this exact motion 1,000 times before. One number, one call, one chance to change everything. But as the phone began to ring, Troy slammed his hand against Michael's window and the 5 men began closing in. What Troy didn't know was that the number Michael had just dialed would bring something to this empty parking lot that no amount of alcohol-fueled courage could prepare them for.
Troy's palm against the window left a smear in the condensation. His grin was wide and predatory, the look of someone who'd done this before and enjoyed it. The 4 other men spread out, surrounding Michael's car in a loose semicircle. Professional enough to cut off escape routes, amateur enough to feel overconfident. "Come on out, old man," Troy called, his voice carrying false friendliness. "Let's talk about that rating you're gonna give me. Let's talk about respect." Michael pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. Through the windshield, he watched one of Troy's friends lift the tire iron, testing its weight. Another pulled out his phone, ready to record whatever was about to happen. Evidence of their fun. Something to laugh about later. 3 rings. 4 rings. Getting desperate, Troy laughed, calling the cops. "Go ahead, we'll be gone before they arrive, but your car won't be, and neither will your teeth." The 5th ring cut off mid-tone. Rodriguez. The voice that answered was deep, gravelly, instantly alert despite the late hour. The voice of someone trained to wake ready for action. Michael's entire demeanor shifted. His voice, which had been soft and accommodating all night, dropped into a different register, harder, clearer, carrying authority that came from somewhere deep and unshakable. "Hawk, it's Michael." Silence on the other end, but Michael could hear the sudden tension, the intake of breath, recognition. "Colonel," the word came out sharp with surprise. "Sir, is everything—" "I have a situation. 5 hostiles, parking lot at mile marker 47, I-94 North. Aggressive posture, likely armed with improvised weapons. Civilian context. I need backup." The voice on the other end transformed instantly from surprised to operational. "Copy that, sir. Current location, west side, 20 minutes out. I can have 15 men there in 18 minutes. Do you require immediate intervention?" "Negative. Situation is contained for now, but it will escalate. Rules of engagement. Non-violent unless necessary. These are civilians, not combatants, but they don't know that yet." "Understood, Colonel. Mobilizing now. Stay on the line." Michael ended the call and set the phone on the dashboard, screen facing up where Troy could see it. The entire conversation had taken less than 30 seconds. Troy's grin had frozen slightly. He'd heard the tone, heard the words, but his alcohol-soaked brain was still processing. Then he laughed, the sound forced now. Did you call someone Colonel?" He looked at his friends, seeking confirmation of the absurdity. Did this fucking Uber driver just play soldier on the phone? One of the other men, Marcus, stepped closer to Troy. He was slightly older than the others, maybe late 30s, with the cautious eyes of someone who'd seen actual trouble. "Troy, man, maybe we should..." "Should what? Be scared of some old man's cosplay fantasy?" He slapped the window again harder. "Get out of the car, now, or we come in and get you." Michael sat perfectly still. His hands remained on the steering wheel, fingers relaxed. His breathing was slow and controlled. He was counting down in his head. 18 minutes, maybe less if Hawk pushed it. He just needed to manage the situation for 18 minutes. "I'm going to give you one chance," Michael said, his voice carrying through the closed window with unnatural clarity. "Get back in your vehicles and leave. Forget this happened. Go home. Sleep it off. Wake up tomorrow and make better choices." "One chance?" Troy's face flushed dark red. "You're giving me one chance? You're locked in a car surrounded by 5 of us, and you're giving me chances?" He turned to his friends, arms spread wide in theatrical disbelief. "Can you believe this shit? This is what happens when old people watch too many action movies. They start thinking they're Bruce fucking Willis."
The tire iron came down on Michael's hood with a crash that echoed across the empty parking lot. A significant dent appeared in the metal. The man holding it, Steve, was grinning. He was the youngest of the group, maybe 25, with the wild eyes of someone looking to prove something. "Oops," Steve said. "Accident." Michael's expression didn't change. He was in a different place now mentally. He compartmentalized the threat, filed it under scenarios he'd encountered hundreds of times. Aggressive hostiles with limited training, overconfident due to numbers, motivated by ego rather than actual objective. Manageable. The timer in his head continued. 16 minutes. Troy tried the door handle. Locked. He rattled it harder, then stepped back and kicked the door. The car rocked slightly. "Last chance, old man. Come out or we come in." 17 more minutes, Michael said quietly, more to himself than to them. "What?" Troy leaned closer to the window, cupping his ear mockingly. "What did you say?" "I said," Michael replied, his voice still calm, "you have 17 more minutes to make the right choice." That's when Marcus grabbed Troy's arm. "Man, something's not right here. This guy's too calm. Nobody's this calm. I think we should—" Troy shoved him away. "You getting scared? Of what? An old man sitting in his car?" "I'm just saying something feels off." "You know what your problem is, Marcus? You overthink everything. It's 5 against 1. He's scared. That's why he's acting tough. It's all an act." Troy pulled out his own phone. "Here, I'm recording. When he starts crying and begging, I want that shit on video." Steve took another swing with a tire iron, this time shattering the passenger side mirror. Glass exploded across the pavement, glittering in the dim streetlight. "Come on, old man. Come out and play." 14 minutes. Michael reached into his jacket pocket slowly, making sure his movements were visible so they wouldn't think he was reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a small leather wallet. Not his regular wallet. This one was older, worn at the edges, the leather darkened with age and handling. He opened it and held it up to the window. Inside was an ID card. Military ID. The photo showed a younger Michael, hair darker, face harder. The text read, LT, Michael J, Rodriguez, United States Army Special Forces. Troy squinted at it, then laughed. "Oh, this is perfect. He's got a fake military ID. Did you get that on eBay, old man? Think that's going to scare us?" But Marcus had gone very quiet. He stepped closer, his eyes focusing on the ID card, on the dates, on the unit designations, on the security features that you couldn't fake. Not easily. "Troy Marcus," said, his voice different now, lower, careful. "I think that might be real." Of course it's not real. Look at him. He's an Uber driver. A lot of vets end up in regular jobs after service, man. That doesn't mean... It means he's full of shit. Troy kicked the door again. "You want to tell me you were special forces? You, driving drunk assholes around for $5 a ride? That's the best you could do with all that elite training." Michael carefully placed the wallet back in his pocket. 12 minutes. Hawk would be gathering the others now, making calls, jumping on bikes. They'd move fast once mobilized. They always did. "I made a choice," Michael said, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. "After 23 years of service, after more deployments than I can count, I chose a simple life. I chose to serve in a different way. There's no shame in that." There's nothing but shame in that. Troy was working himself into a frenzy now, feeding off his own aggression. "You're a quitter, a failure. All that training, all the opportunity, and you ended up here? Pathetic." Steve took another swing, this time hitting the driver's side window. It cracked, but didn't shatter. Safety glass. He'd have to hit it multiple times to break through. "Want me to get him out, Troy?" Steve asked, winding up for another swing. "Not yet. Let him sweat for a little longer. Let him think about all the tough guy things he could have said, could have done, if he wasn't such a pussy." 10 minutes. The wind pecked, pushing clouds across the weak streetlight glow. The temperature was dropping. Michael could see his breath fogging on the inside of the window. Troy and his friends didn't seem to notice the pull. They were too fired up, too locked into their own momentum. Marcus tried one more time. "Troy, seriously, we've made our point. Let's just go. We scared him, we fucked up his car, we won. Let's go before this gets complicated.
Gets complicated how? You think the cops are coming? Nobody's coming. Nobody cares about some Uber driver getting roughed up in an empty parking lot at midnight. This is Chicago. Shit like this happens 1,000 times a night. I'm just saying. You're just saying you're a coward. Troy turned on Marcus now, redirecting his aggression. You want to leave? Fine. Take your car and go. But don't come calling next time we're looking for someone to back us up. Marcus hesitated, looking at Michael's car, then at Troy, and then at the dark highway beyond. Finally, he shook his head. I'm out. This feels wrong. Then get the fuck out of here. Marcus walked back to his car without another word. The engine started, headlights came on, and he pulled out of the parking lot heading back toward the city. That left 8 minutes. Anybody else want to pussy out? Troy looked at the remaining 3 men. Steve with his tire iron, a short, stocky guy they called T-Bone, and a tall, quiet one named Derek, who hadn't said a word, but hadn't left either. They all shook their heads. Loyalty or stupidity or just the momentum of the situation. It didn't matter which. Good. Now let's get this done. Troy picked up a piece of broken concrete from the parking lot edge. Old man, I'm gonna count to 3. If you're not out of that car by 3, I'm putting this through your windshield. Then we're pulling you out anyway, but you'll have glass in your face when we do it. Michael checked his phone. 7 minutes. 1. He looked at each of the 4 men surrounding his car, memorizing faces, looking for weapons, identifying the most dangerous one. That would be Steve with the tire iron. The youngest, the most eager to prove himself, the least controlled. He'd swing first if things went physical. 2. Michael's hands moved to his lap, out of sight. His right hand reached under the seat, fingers finding and gripping something cold and heavy. Not a gun. He didn't carry guns anymore unless absolutely necessary. But he wasn't completely unprepared. 3. Troy drew back his arm to throw the concrete. That's when the sound reached them. Distant, but growing louder. Unmistakable. Motorcycles. Lots of them. The sound started as a low rumble on the horizon, barely distinguishable from distant thunder. But Michael knew that sound. He'd heard it in a dozen different countries, in cities and deserts and mountain passes. The synchronized thunder of military motorcycles moving in formation. Troy's arm was still raised, the concrete chunk ready to fly, but something made him pause. The sound was growing louder, closer, multiplying, not just a few bikes out for a night ride. This was different. This was an army on wheels, and they were all coming to the exact spot where 4 men had just made the worst mistake of their lives.
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Troy's arm lowered slowly, his head turning toward the approaching sound. The concrete chunk suddenly felt heavier in his hand. His alcohol-fogged mind struggled to process what his ears were telling him. "The fuck is that?" Steve asked, the tire iron hanging loose at his side now. The rumble grew into a roar. Through the rain-streaked darkness, headlights appeared on the highway. 1 light, then 2, then 5, then 10, then too many that count individually. They moved in tight formation, 3 columns wide, approaching the rest area exit with mechanical precision. "That's a lot of bikes," T-Bone said quietly. The first motorcycle took the exit ramp, then the second. Then they just kept coming, an endless stream of chrome and steel and thundering engines. They weren't speeding or showing off. They moved with purpose, with discipline, like a military convoy on a mission. Troy dropped the concrete. The chunk hit the pavement with a dull thud that was immediately swallowed by the roar of engines. The motorcycles filled the parking lot with practice efficiency. They didn't need to discuss positions or debate where to park. They simply flowed into formation, creating a semicircle around Michael's car with Troy and his 3 friends caught in the middle. The engines cut simultaneously, leaving a sudden silence that was somehow more threatening than the noise had been. 15 men dismounted from their bikes, then 20, then 25. They kept coming until 30 motorcycles sat in perfect formation, their riders standing beside them in the rain. These weren't typical bikers, no wild beards or chaotic patches. No drinking or loud talking. They wore matching vests over leather jackets, and on each vest, illuminated by the streetlights, was a patch. Special Forces Veterans Association Chicago Chapter. Below that, on many of them, smaller patches denoting units, campaigns, years of service. The man who'd been riding lead walked forward. He was in his mid-50s, powerfully built, with gray hair cropped military short. His face bore scars that spoke of combat, not bar fights. His eyes swept the scene with the practice efficiency of someone trained to assess threats instantly. He stopped 10 feet from Troy and his friends. Then, in a move that made Troy flinch, he turned his back on them completely and approached Michael's car instead. Colonel Rodriguez. The man's voice carried authority and respect in equal measure. "Sir?" Michael opened his car door and stepped out for the first time since arriving at the rest area. As he stood, his posture changed completely. The hunched apologetic stance of an Uber driver melted away, replaced by something that had been hiding underneath all along. His spine straightened, his shoulders squared, his chin came up. In an instant, he looked like what he'd always been, a commanding officer. "Hawk," Michael's voice matched the other man's tone. 18 minutes. You made good time. Pushed it hard when you said you had hostiles, sir. The boys are ready to roll the moment I made the call. Hawk's eyes flicked toward Michael's car, assessment and dismissal in a single glance. "These them?" "These are them." Disappointing. Hawk turned to face Troy now, and his gaze was like a physical weight. Really disappointing. The 30 veterans began moving, not aggressively, but with unmistakable purpose. They formed a tighter circle around the scene. None of them spoke, none of them needed to. Their presence alone was overwhelming. Troy's face had gone from red to pale. His friends had closed ranks instinctively, backs together, suddenly aware of how badly they'd miscalculated. "Now wait," Troy started. "You wait, and you listen. Do you know who you just threatened? Do you have any idea? Look, man, this was just, I'm not your man. You don't speak unless I tell you to speak." He turned to Michael. "Colonel, with your permission, I'd like to educate these gentlemen about who they decided to fuck with tonight." Michael nodded once. "Proceed." Hawk pulled out his phone and held it up so Troy and his friends could see the screen. It displayed a military service record, Michael's service record. Lieutenant Colonel Michael J. Rodriguez, 23 years of active service, 7 deployments, Iraq twice, Afghanistan 4 times, plus classified operations in 3 other countries I can't name in civilian company. Hawk's finger scrolled down the screen. 3 silver stars, 2 bronze stars, Purple Heart with 2 clusters, Combat Infantry Badge, Special Forces tab, Ranger tab, Master Parachutist Badge. He lowered the phone. "Do you know what any of that means? Those medals, those badges, each one represents moments when this man did things you couldn't imagine in your softest nightmares. Each one represents times when he made decisions that saved lives while risking his own." Steve had dropped the tire iron. It lay at his feet, forgotten. "Fallujah, 2006, Hawk continued, his voice taking on a storytelling cadence that commanded attention. "Colonel Rodriguez led a rescue operation into a district that was completely overrun. Every other unit had been ordered to stand down because command deemed the risk too high. But there were 12 men trapped in a building surrounded by insurgents. The colonel didn't ask permission, he didn't wait for approval. He took his team in. Base men? They were in that building. They were the ones who had given up hope, who had written letters to their families in their heads, and who were counting their ammunition and preparing for the final stand. And then they heard helicopters. They heard gunfire. They heard someone on the radio saying, 'Hang on, boys, we're coming for you.'" One of the veterans Hawk had indicated stepped forward. He was younger than most of the others, maybe late 30s, with a prosthetic left arm visible beneath his jacket sleeve. "I was a private first class, 19 years old, first deployment. Been in country 3 weeks when we got pinned down. I was hit in the arm, bleeding bad, going into shock. I remember thinking this was it. This was how it ended. Then Colonel Rodriguez came through that door like something out of a movie. Except it wasn't a movie. It was real. He was real." The veteran's voice thickened with emotion. "He carried me out. Himself. Me and 3 others. Made 2 trips under fire because his team couldn't carry all of us at once. I lost my arm that day, but I kept my life. Because of him." Troy tried to speak,
but Hawk cut him off with a gesture. Kandahar, 2009. Suicide bomber targeting a market. The colonel was first on scene. He's not a bomb tech, wasn't his job, but there were civilians evacuating and someone needed to buy them time. He talked that bomber down for 17 minutes while his team cleared 300 people out of the blast radius. 17 minutes of convincing a man with explosives strapped to his chest that there was a better way. He saved 300 lives that day with nothing but his voice and his courage. Another veteran spoke up. Helmand Province, 2011. Our convoy got ambushed. IED disabled the lead vehicle. The colonel's vehicle could have bypassed, could have radioed for support and waited. Instead, he dismounted, under fire, and coordinated a defense that held off 50 attackers until QRF arrived. 6 of us would have died in that disabled vehicle if he hadn't made that choice. Hawk's phone screen changed to a photograph. Michael, younger, in dress uniform, standing at attention while a general pinned a medal on his chest. Silver Star citation, Hawk read, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States. When his firebase came under sustained rocket attack, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez organized a counterattack that successfully neutralized the enemy position despite overwhelming odds and significant personal risk. He lowered the phone. That's the official language. You want to know what really happened? A unit of 50 insurgents attacked the firebase where the colonel and 30 men were stationed. They had rockets, mortars, heavy machine guns. They had numbers and position. The colonel didn't have air support coming for 20 minutes. 20 minutes where those men would have been systematically destroyed. So what did he do? He organized a fucking assault. Uphill, into superior numbers, into heavy fire. Because sitting and waiting meant death, and attacking meant a chance. And you know what? It worked. They broke the attack, scattered the enemy, and held until the helicopters arrived. 11 men wounded, including the colonel. 0 men killed. Because he refused to accept that there were no good options. The rain was falling harder now, but nobody moved. Troy and his friends stood frozen, the reality of their situation finally penetrating the alcohol haze. After all that, Hawk continued, his voice hard with anger now, after 23 years of service, after 7 deployments, after medals and commendations and classified operations that history won't even record, the colonel retired. You know why? Not because he was tired, not because he couldn't do it anymore, but because he had given enough, he had served enough, he had bled enough, and he decided he wanted to live a simple life, a peaceful life, serving his community in a different way.
Hawk stepped closer to Troy, close enough that Troy could smell the leather and rain and cold determination. "And you?" Hawk said softly, the quiet tone somehow more threatening than shouting would have been. "You thought this man was weak. You thought driving Uber made him less than you. You thought age and humility meant he couldn't defend himself. You made every mistake young, stupid, aggressive men have been making for thousands of years. You mistook wisdom for weakness." Troy's mouth opened, but nothing came out. What could he possibly say? Michael stepped forward, standing beside Hawk. "I gave you a chance to leave," he said quietly. "I always give chances. That's part of who I am now. But you chose to escalate. You chose violence. You chose to surround and threaten someone you perceived as vulnerable. That says everything about who you are." We weren't going to... Troy finally found his voice, but the words came out weak and unconvincing. "You weren't going to what?" Another veteran spoke up, stepping into the light. He was older, maybe 60, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in hard conditions. "You weren't going to hurt him, son? I watched you kick his car, watched your friend here smash his mirror and dent his hood with a tire iron, watched you pull out that chunk of concrete. If you weren't planning to hurt him, what exactly were you planning to do?" It was just supposed to scare him, teach him respect." "Teach him respect?" Hawk's laugh was bitter. "You were going to teach respect to a man who commanded hundreds of soldiers, who earned respect through sacrifice and leadership, who has more courage in his smallest finger than you'll have in your entire life." The 30 veterans had closed in tighter now, forming a wall of bodies around Troy and his 3 friends, not threatening violence, but making it clear that escape wasn't an option, that this conversation would continue until these men learned what they needed to learn. "Here's what's going to happen," Michael said, his command voice fully engaged now, the voice that had given orders in combat zones, that had been trained to cut through chaos and fear and confusion. "You're going to listen. You're going to understand. And then you're going to make a choice about who you want to be for the rest of your lives." Michael stood in the rain surrounded by 30 men who would have followed him into hell without question, facing 4 young men who'd thought they were hunters but had become prey. The tire iron lay forgotten on the wet pavement, the concrete chunk had rolled into the darkness. What had started as an attack on an Uber driver had become something else entirely, a moment of truth where bullies would learn what real strength looked like. But this lesson was far from over, because Michael wasn't interested in revenge. What he was about to do would change these men forever if they were smart enough to listen. The question wasn't whether they'd leave this parking lot. The question was whether they'd leave as the same people who'd arrived, or whether tonight would mark the moment their lives took a different path entirely.
Michael walked slowly around Troy and his friends, his boots splashing through puddles, his movements deliberate and measured. The 30 veterans remained motionless, a silent jury watching judgment unfold. "Do you know what the hardest part of military training is?" Michael asked, his voice conversational now, almost gentle. "It's not the physical challenges, it's not learning to shoot or march or navigate. The hardest part is learning to see people." He stopped in front of Troy. "Really see them, not as obstacles or threats or opportunities, but as human beings, with their own stories, their own pain, their own reasons for being exactly where they are at exactly that moment." Troy's jaw was clenched, his body rigid with a mixture of fear and residual defiance. The alcohol was wearing off now, replaced by adrenaline and the cold reality of the situation. "When I was 23 years old, I was a lot like you. Angry, convinced the world owed me something, using my size and my training to intimidate people. I thought that made me strong. I thought that made me a man." He turned to address all 4 of them now. "Then I met my commanding officer, Colonel William Hayes, hard as nails, respected by everyone, feared by many. I was assigned to his unit, and the first day I tried to impress him, tried to show him how tough I was, how aggressive, how ready for combat." One of the veterans, an older black man with gray in his beard, chuckled softly. "I remember Colonel Hayes. He didn't suffer fools." Michael nodded. "No, he didn't. He took one look at my performance and pulled me aside. And do you know what he said? He said, 'Rodriguez, any idiot can break things. Any fool can hurt people. Real strength is knowing when not to. Real courage is choosing restraint when you have the power to destroy.'" The rain was coming down harder now, turning the parking lot into a maze of reflecting lights and shadows. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "I didn't understand him at first," Michael admitted. "I thought he was soft. I thought he was trying to weaken me. So I kept being aggressive, kept pushing, kept trying to prove I was the toughest guy in the unit." Hawk spoke up from behind Troy. "Tell them what happened in Frankfurt." Michael's expression darkened. "We were on leave. Germany. I got drunk, got into an argument with some locals at a bar. It escalated. I put 3 men in the hospital that night. Broken bones, concussions. One guy needed surgery on his jaw. And you were proud of it," Hawk added. "At first." Michael agreed. "At first. I thought I'd defended our honor. Thought I'd shown those Germans not to mess with American soldiers. I thought I was a hero." He paused, his eyes distant, remembering. "Colonel Hayes came to see me in the holding cell. I expected him to be angry, expected discipline, court-martial, dishonorable discharge. Instead, he brought photographs." "Photographs of what?" Steve asked, then flinched when several veterans turned sharp glares at him. But Michael raised a hand. "It's okay. He can ask questions. That's part of learning." Michael looked at Steve.
Photographs of the men I'd hurt. One of them was a teacher, had 2 young daughters. His jaw was wired shut. He couldn't work for 3 months, couldn't eat solid food, couldn't talk clearly. Those little girls had to watch their father suffer because I decided my pride was more important than his life. The weight of that statement settled over the parking lot like the rain. Another one was a medical student. The broken arm I gave him meant he had to postpone his residency for a year of his life, his career, his dreams, delayed because I needed to prove how tough I was. The third man was engaged to be married. Wedding was supposed to be 2 months later. He couldn't stand at the altar without crutches because of what I did to his knee. Michael's voice had gone quiet, but it carried perfectly in the silence. Colonel Hayes showed me those pictures, showed me police reports with statements from witnesses, showed me that those 3 men hadn't started the fight. They'd been defending themselves. I had been the aggressor. I had been the threat. I had been the bad guy. Troy shifted his weight uncomfortably. The reality of what Michael was saying was hitting close to home. Colonel Hayes gave me a choice. I could face court-martial, which I deserved, or I could do something harder. I could go to those 3 men and their families. I could look them in the eyes and see the damage I'd done. I could apologize, knowing that sorry would never be enough. And then I could spend the rest of my career proving that Colonel Hayes was right. "What did you choose?" T-Bone asked quietly. "The harder path. Always the harder path." He looked up at the dark sky, rain running down his face. I went to each of those men, sat with them, listened to how I'd changed their lives. The teacher's daughters were afraid of soldiers now. The medical student had to take out additional loans because of the delayed residency. The engaged man's fiancée left him during his recovery because she couldn't handle the trauma. Michael's voice grew firmer now. That's what strength looks like. Not threatening an Uber driver in a parking lot, not smashing windows and denting hoods. Real strength is talking for 17 minutes when every instinct screams to take the violent option. Real strength is seeing the humanity in someone who's supposed to be your enemy. He took a step closer to Troy. "Do you understand what I'm telling you? You thought tonight was about showing me who was tough, but you showed me something else entirely. You showed me 4 young men who are heading down a path I've seen too many times before, a path that ends in prison, or in a door morgue, or in a lifetime of regret." Troy's defiance had completely crumbled. His shoulders sagged. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to make a choice. The same choice Colonel Hayes gave me 20 years ago. The easy path or the hard path." "What's the easy path?" "You leave here tonight. You go home. You tell yourselves this was just bad luck, that you ran into the wrong guy, that it doesn't mean anything. You keep living the way you've been living, keep drinking, keep fighting, keep using your size and your aggression to make yourselves feel powerful. Keep heading toward the inevitable conclusion of that lifestyle." Or you choose the hard path. You look at yourselves honestly. You see the damage you are ready to do tonight. Not just to me, but to yourselves. You understand that who you are right now isn't who you have to be forever, and you start making different choices. Hawk pulled out his phone again. "We run a program. Veterans helping young men who are heading down the wrong path. Job training, counseling, mentorship. It's not easy. It requires work, commitment, honesty. But it changes lives." "Why? Why would you help us after what we tried to do?" Michael smiled, and for the first time that night, it was a genuine smile. "Because Colonel Hayes helped me when he could have destroyed me. Because someone has to break the cycle. Because I spent 23 years in the military, and you know what I learned? The real enemy isn't people. It's ignorance, it's rage, it's the belief that violence is the answer to everything. And the only way to defeat that enemy is with patience, with teaching, with showing a better way." He gestured to the 30 veterans surrounding them. "Every man here has a story.
Every one of them has made mistakes. Every one of them has been where you are, angry, lost, using aggression to mask pain or fear or inadequacy. And every one of them found a way to become something better. That's why we're here. Not to hurt you, but to offer you a choice. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to feel. The rain intensified, turning the parking lot into a thundering cascade of water. But nobody moved. Troy looked at his three friends, then back at Michael, then at the wall of veterans surrounding them. Finally, he looked down at his own hands, the hands that had been ready to throw concrete through a windshield minutes ago.
I don't understand, Troy said, his voice raw. We threatened you. We damaged your car. We were ready to hurt you. Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you calling the police? Why are you offering to help us? Michael stepped close enough that only Troy could hear his next words clearly. Because anger is easy. Revenge is easy. Walking away and letting you destroy yourselves would be easy. But I didn't spend 23 years learning to be a leader just to choose the easy path when it matters most. He raised his voice so all four men could hear. You're standing at a crossroads. One path leads to more nights like this, more violence, more escalation, until eventually you cross a line you can't come back from. The other path is harder. It requires admitting you're on the wrong track. It requires work and humility and changing who you are at your core. But it's the path that leads to actually becoming the men you pretend to be when you're trying to prove how tough you are. The rain pounded down on the parking lot, washing away the swagger and aggression that had driven four young men to surround an Uber driver's car with violent intentions. Now those same four men stood surrounded by 30 veterans who'd seen real combat, faced real enemies, and learned real wisdom. Troy's hand trembled as he reached into his pocket, not for a weapon, but for his phone. What he was about to do would either mark the beginning of genuine change or prove that some people were too far gone to save. Michael watched and waited, because this moment, this choice, would reveal everything about who these young men really were beneath the anger and alcohol and false bravado.
Troy's phone screen illuminated his face in the darkness. His fingers hovered over it, shaking, from cold, from adrenaline, from something deeper. Around him, 30 veterans waited in silence. No one rushed him, no one demanded anything. They simply stood as witnesses to whatever decision he was about to make. I need to... Troy's voice caught. He cleared his throat and tried again. I need to call Marcus. Michael nodded. The one who left earlier? Yeah. He tried to tell me this was wrong, tried to get me to stop. I called him a coward. I need to tell him he was right. Troy made the call, putting it on speaker so everyone could hear. It rang 4 times before Marcus answered, his voice wary. Troy? What happened? Are you okay? Troy looked around at the faces watching him. I'm not okay, Marcus, but I'm alive, and I need to tell you something. You were right about everything. This guy, Michael, Fuck, man, we almost made the worst mistake of our lives tonight. There was a long pause. Then Marcus's voice came back softer. What do you mean? Troy told him about the veterans, about Michael's service record, about the lesson they'd just received. His voice grew stronger as he talked, as if speaking the truth out loud was helping him process it himself. When he finished, Marcus was quiet for several seconds. So what are you going to do now? I don't know. They're offering to help us, some kind of program. But I don't even know if I deserve help after what I tried to do. Maybe that's exactly why you need it. Look, Troy, I've known you since high school. You're not a bad guy. You're angry all the time and drunk. And you've been getting worse. I've watched you go from someone who'd stand up for his friends to someone who looks for fights for no reason. I've been waiting for something like this to happen. Troy's eyes glistened in the streetlight. I don't want to be this person anymore. Then don't be. Simply. If these men are offering you a way out, take it. Troy ended the call and looked at Michael. Okay, the hard path.
I'll take the hard path, but I don't even know where to start. You start with accountability. You damaged my car, that needs to be addressed. Troy nodded immediately. I'll pay for it, all of it, however much it costs. Not just pay for it. Fix it, with your own hands. Hawk knows a body shop where veterans work. You'll go there, you'll work alongside them, and you'll repair what you damaged. You'll learn what it takes to build instead of destroy. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Michael turned to Steve, who was still standing near the fallen Tyron. What about you? Steve looked younger now, stripped of his aggressive posture. I don't have money for the mirror I broke. I lost my job 3 weeks ago. That's why I was drinking tonight. That's why I was so angry. Then you work it off, Hawk said, stepping forward. We've got a community center that needs renovation. You'll put in hours there until the debt is paid. And while you're there, you'll talk to the counselors. Figure out why losing a job made you want to hurt people. Steve nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. I can do that. I want to do that. T-Bone spoke up without being asked. I didn't break anything, but I was here. I was ready to help them hurt you. That makes me just as guilty. Michael steadied him. Why were you here, T-Bone? What were you getting out of this? T-Bone thought for a long moment. Belonging, I guess. Troy and these guys, they're my friends, or I thought they were. I didn't want to be left out. Didn't want to be the one who was afraid. So you were willing to participate in violence just to feel included. Michael's voice wasn't judgmental, just clarifying. Yeah. God, that sounds so stupid when you say that out loud. It's not stupid, it's human. The need to belong is one of our most powerful drives. But belonging to the wrong group, following them down the wrong path, that's how good people end up doing terrible things. Michael gestured to the veterans around them. This is a group worth belonging to. Men who have learned that real brotherhood isn't about being the toughest or the meanest, it's about making each other better. Derek, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. I'm the oldest one here. I'm 35. I should have known better. I should have stopped this before it started. Instead, I just followed along because... He trailed off. Because why? Michael prompted gently. Because I'm nobody. I work construction. I live alone. I have nothing going for me. When Troy invited me out tonight, it was the first time anyone had included me in anything in months. I was so grateful to be part of something that I didn't care what that something was. Michael walked over to Derek and put a hand on his shoulder. Do you know what the military taught me about being nobody? It taught me that there's no such thing. Every person has value. Every person has potential. Every person has something to contribute. The question isn't whether you matter. The question is whether you're putting your energy into things that matter. Derek's shoulders shook slightly. He was crying now, silently, the rain mixing with his tears. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be better. Neither did I, Michael said. That's why Colonel Hayes taught me. That's why these men are here. That's why we run this program, because nobody figures it out alone. We all need guides. We all need people who believe we can change even when we don't believe it ourselves. Hawk pulled out business cards and handed them to each of the 4 men. This is the address of our center. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. You show up, we'll start the process. Job training, counseling, community service, whatever you need. But you have to show up. You have to do the work. We can offer you the path, but you have to walk it. Troy took his card, staring at it like it was a lifeline. What if we fail? What if we try and we can't change? Then you try again. Change isn't a one-time decision. It's 1,000 small decisions made every day, sometimes every hour. You'll fail sometimes. We all do. The question is whether you get back up and keep trying. One of the younger veterans stepped forward. Michael recognized him as Jason, the man who'd spoken earlier about losing his arm. Can I say something? Michael nodded. Jason addressed Troy and his friends directly. I was where you are. Not exactly the same situation, but close enough. When I got back from Iraq, I was angry. I'd lost my arm. I'd lost my sense of purpose. I felt like the world owed me something.
I got into fights, got arrested twice, was heading straight toward prison or death. He held up his prosthetic arm. This thing, it's not what disabled me. Anger disabled me. Feeling sorry for myself disabled me. Thinking that because I'd suffered, I had the right to make other people suffer, that disabled me. The prosthetic, it's just a tool. My real disability was in my head. Jason's voice grew stronger. Colonel Rodriguez found me in a jail cell after my second arrest. He didn't lecture me. He didn't tell me I was throwing my life away. He just said, when you're ready to stop being angry and start being useful, call me. Then he left his card and walked away. How long did it take, Steve asked, before you were ready? 3 more weeks. 3 more weeks of being angry, of blaming everyone else, of making excuses. Then one morning, I woke up and realized I was 23 years old and I'd already given up on life. That scared me more than anything I'd faced in Iraq. So I called the colonel. Jason smiled. That was 8 years ago. Today I'm a counselor at the Veterans Center. I help other guys who are where I was. I'm married, I have a daughter, I have a life I never thought I'd have, because someone believed I could change before I believed it myself. The rain was starting to let up now, tapering from a downpour to a steady drizzle. The sky to the east showed the first hints of gray that preceded dawn. They'd been in this parking lot for over an hour.
Michael checked his watch. It's almost 2 a.m. You all need to get home. Sleep this off. Think about what happened here tonight. Tomorrow morning, you can make the decision about whether to show up at the center or not. Nobody's going to force you. Nobody's going to hunt you down if you don't come. This is entirely your choice. But, Hawk added, his voice carrying a warning edge, if you choose not to come, if you choose to go back to the way you were living, understand that this protection ends here. You got lucky tonight. You threatened a good man who chose to teach you instead of hurt you. Next time you might not be so lucky. Next time you might pick the wrong person and end up in prison or worse. Troy looked at his 3 friends, then back at Michael. We'll be there, all of us, 9 a.m. Good. Michael pulled out his own phone and opened the Uber app. Troy's trip was still active, frozen at the point where Michael had stopped. He completed it and added a note. Trip ended early due to passenger behavioral issues. Vehicle damage occurred, being addressed privately. Then he did something that made Troy's eyes widen. He didn't give a rating. He didn't file a formal complaint. He simply ended the trip and closed the app. You're not reporting me? Troy asked, disbelief in his voice. What would be the point? To get you banned from Uber? To create a record that would follow you around? You're already facing consequences. You're going to repair my car and do community service. Beyond that, what happened here tonight is between us. You get a clean slate, but only if you use it wisely. Troy's face crumpled. I don't understand. After everything I said, everything I did, you're just letting it go? Michael smiled. I'm not letting it go. I'm transforming it. That's what leaders do. We take bad situations and find ways to make them into learning opportunities. You tried to hurt me tonight, but instead you gave me a chance to possibly change 4 lives. That's not a bad outcome. The 30 veterans began mounting their motorcycles, the coordinated movement rippling through the formation. Engines started, a rumbling thunder that was somehow comforting now rather than threatening. Hawk shook hands with Troy, then with each of his friends. 9 a.m. Don't make me come looking for you. One by one, the motorcycles pulled out, their formation as precise leaving as it had been arriving. Within minutes, only Michael and the 4 young men remained in the parking lot. Troy approached Michael's damaged car, running his hand over the dent in the hood. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I was ready to do worse. But you didn't do worse, Michael pointed out. When the moment came to actually commit to violence, you hesitated. That hesitation might have saved your life. It definitely saved your future. Well, why did you call them? Steve asked. You knew they'd come, knew they'd be intimidating. You could have just driven away or called the police. Why bring the veterans? Michael considered the question carefully. Because I wanted you to see something. You spend your time trying to be tough, trying to be intimidating, trying to prove you're the most dangerous men in the room. But real dangerous men don't have to prove it. Real warriors don't look for fights. Real strength doesn't need to advertise itself. He gestured at the empty parking lot where 30 motorcycles had been. Those men are some of the most dangerous people you'll ever meet.
Combat veterans, special operations, men who've done things I can't talk about in classified operations. They're legitimately lethal. And yet they came here tonight not to fight, but to teach. They came to show you what discipline looks like, what controlled cower looks like, what it means to be strong enough to show mercy. Derek nodded slowly. They could have destroyed us, easily, Michael agreed. But destruction isn't the goal. Transformation is. T-Bone looked at the eastern sky where dawn was definitely approaching now. It's almost morning. None of us have slept. Are we supposed to show up at 9 a.m. like this? Yes, Michael said firmly. Show up tired. Show up hungover if you still are. Show up exactly as you are right now, because that's who you are today. Tomorrow you'll be different. Next week you'll be more different. But the journey starts from exactly where you are right now. Troy held out his hand to Michael. Thank you. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you. Michael shook his hand. Everyone deserves a chance to change. Not everyone takes it. Be one of the ones who does. The four men walked to their two remaining cars. Marcus had taken one when he left earlier. As they got in, Michael called out one more time. One more thing. When you get home, look at yourselves in the mirror. Really look. See who you are right now. Remember this feeling, this shame, this regret, this sense that you've been living wrong. Keep that feeling alive. Let it motivate you. Because change doesn't come from feeling good about yourself. It comes from being honest about who you are and deciding to become someone better. Troy nodded from the driver's seat. 9 a.m. We'll be there. The two cars pulled out of the parking lot, their tail lights disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Michael stood alone in the rain looking at his damaged car, the dented hood, the broken mirror, the cracked window. Physical reminders of how close things had come to disaster. He pulled out his phone and called Hawk. They gone? Hawk answered immediately. They're gone. Question is whether they'll show up tomorrow. What do you think? I think they will. I think Troy especially is scared enough of who he's becoming that he'll take any lifeline offered. The others will follow his lead. And if they don't show up, then we tried. That's all we can do. Plant seeds and hope they grow. I paused. Thanks for coming, Hawk. Thanks for bringing everyone. Are you kidding? When you call and say you need us, we come. Always. The whole reason this program exists is because of you. Because you showed us that serving doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It just changes form. They talked for a few more minutes, coordinating logistics for the morning, making sure everything would be ready if Troy and his friends actually showed up. Then Michael ended the call. He got back in his car. The interior smelled like spilled vodka and rain. The broken glass on the passenger seat sparkled in the dome light. The dashboard showed it was 2:17 a.m. He'd been supposed to end his shift 3 hours ago. But as he started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, Michael wasn't thinking about his interrupted shift or his damaged car. He was thinking about 4 young men standing at a crossroads, facing the most important decision of their lives. And he was thinking about Colonel Hayes, 20 years dead now, buried in Arlington National Cemetery with full honors. The man who saved Michael's life by teaching him that real strength was restraint, that real courage was choosing the harder path, that real leadership was transforming people instead of destroying them. I'm still learning, Colonel, Michael said quietly to the empty car. Still trying to live up to what you taught me. Hope I did okay tonight. The highway stretched ahead, nearly empty at this hour. Chicago's skyline glowed in the distance, a city full of people facing their own crossroads, their own choices about who to become. Michael merged onto I-94 and headed home, his damaged Camry running perfectly despite the cosmetic damage. Some things, he reflected, are more resilient than they appeared. Some things could take a beating and keep going. Maybe people were like that too. The sun was rising over Chicago as Michael drove through empty streets towards home. But his night wasn't over yet. In a few hours, he'd find out whether 4 young men would show up to claim their second chance or whether they'd disappear back into the lives they'd been living. What Michael didn't know was that the decision Troy and his friends were about to make would ripple far beyond that parking line, far beyond one damaged Uber car, far beyond one night of violence avoided.
Michael pulled into his apartment complex as the sun fully crested the horizon. His body ached with the particular exhaustion that came not from physical exertion, but from emotional intensity. 23 years of military service had taught him that managing violence was often more draining than engaging in it. His apartment was small and neat, the home of a man who'd learned to live with less and found peace in simplicity. He made coffee and sat by the window, looking out over the city. His phone buzzed with messages from Hawk, from other veterans who'd been in the parking lot, all checking in, all making sure he was okay. He responded to each one, then sat in silence as the city woke up around him. At 8:45 a.m., Michael was at the Veterans Center. It was a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but inside it was clean and well organized. There was a gym, a workshop, offices for counselors, a meeting hall, all of it funded by donations, veteran benefits, and the tireless work of men and women who believed in second chances. Hawk was already there, along with Jason and 3 other counselors. They'd set up a conference room with coffee, water, and folders containing intake forms. Everything was ready. The question was whether anyone would show up to use it. 8:55 a.m. The parking lot was empty except for the vehicles belonging to staff. 9 a.m. Still nothing. Hawk shook his head. I really thought they'd come. Give them time, Michael said, though doubt was creeping in. It was easy to promise change in the moment, when surrounded by 30 veterans in a dark parking lot. Much harder to follow through in the cold light of morning. 9:07 a.m. A car pulled into the parking lot. Troy's car. He stepped out alone, looking exhausted and sick. Hungover, certainly, but more than that. He looked like a man who hadn't slept because his conscience wouldn't let him. He walked to the entrance and stopped, staring at the door as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Then he squared his shoulders and came inside. I'm here, he said simply when he saw Michael. The others, I don't know if they're coming. I called them this morning, but nobody answered. But I'm here. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. Relief. Pride. Hope. That took courage. No. Courage was Marcus leaving when he knew it was wrong. This is survival. I woke up this morning and realized that if I don't change, I'm going to end up dead or in prison. That's not courage. That's desperation. Desperation is often the beginning of wisdom, Michael replied. Come on, let's get started. They were walking toward the conference room when another car pulled up. Then another. Steve and Derek together in one vehicle. T-Bone in his own. They looked as rough as Troy, exhausted, hungover, scared. But they were here. The 4 men sat around the conference table, accepting coffee with shaking hands. Hawk distributed the intake forms while Jason explained the program structure. This isn't easy, Jason told them. This isn't a few meetings and you're done. This is months of work. Counseling, job training, community service. You'll have to confront things about yourselves that you've been avoiding. You'll have to change habits, change thinking patterns, probably change friend groups. Some days you'll want to quit. Some days you'll think it's too hard, not worth it. Why are you telling us this? Steve asked. Aren't you supposed to sell us on it? We're not selling anything, Michael said. We're offering you a path, but you need to know what you're committing to. Halfway won't work. Quitting halfway through is worse than not starting at all. So we're asking you right now, before we invest time and resources, are you in? Really in? Troy looked at his 3 friends, then back at Michael. I spent the whole night thinking about what you said, about choosing the hard path, about Colonel Hayes teaching you 20 years ago. And I realized something. My whole life I've been choosing the easy path. When things got difficult, I got drunk. When I felt weak, I acted tough. When I didn't like something, I tried to break it. His voice grew stronger. That's gotten me nowhere. 32 years old, no career, no family, no purpose, just anger and alcohol and friends who aren't really friends at all. Last night in that parking lot, I saw what my future looks like if I keep going this way. And I don't want that future. Steve nodded. I'm tired. I'm so tired of being angry all the time. I'm tired of waking up and my first thought is, who do I hate today? I'm tired of everything being a fight. I want peace. I don't even know what that feels like anymore, but I want it. T-Bone cleared his throat. I'm here because I don't want to be nobody anymore. Last night, Derek said he felt like nobody. I felt that. I felt like that for years.
just going through the motions, existing but not living. If this program can help me find purpose, find meaning, then yeah, I'm in. Derek spoke last, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. I'm 35. If I don't change now, I never will. I've wasted enough years. I'm in. Michael felt something shift in the room. This was the moment. This was where potential began transforming into reality. Then let's begin, he said. The next 2 hours were spent on intake procedures. Medical histories, employment histories, substance use assessments, psychological screenings. It was thorough and sometimes uncomfortable, forcing each man to confront exactly where they were in life. No sugarcoating, no excuses. When Troy admitted he'd been drinking heavily for 5 years, the counselor didn't judge, just noted it down and explained the resources available for substance abuse treatment. When Steve revealed he'd been unemployed not for 3 weeks, but for 3 months, living off credit cards and his mother's money, they discussed job training programs and resume building. When T-Bone confessed he'd been diagnosed with depression years ago but never followed through with treatment, they scheduled an appointment with a psychiatric nurse practitioner. When Derek talked about his isolation, about going days without speaking to a human being, they connected him with group therapy sessions and social activities. Each revelation was met not with condemnation, but with solutions. Each problem was treated as solvable. Each man began to see that his situation, while difficult, wasn't hopeless. At 12, Hawk led them to the workshop. Michael's car was already there, parked in the bay. The dent in the hood, the broken mirror, the cracked window, all visible evidence of the previous night's aggression. Troy, Steve, this is your first assignment. You're going to fix this. Every dent, every crack, every scratch. 2 of our master mechanics will teach you. You'll learn bodywork, paint matching, glass replacement. You'll do it right, and when you're done, this car will look better than it did before you damaged it. I can't believe I did this to another person's property. Like standing here looking at it in daylight, sober. What the hell was I thinking? You weren't thinking, one of the mechanics said, walking over. His name was Rodriguez, no relation to Michael, but the coincidence made everyone smile slightly. That's what substances do. They shut down the part of your brain that makes good decisions. But now you get to make it right. The mechanics explained the process. First, they'd assess the damage. Then they'd order parts. Then, over the next several weeks, Troy and Steve would spend their afternoons in the workshop learning skills while repairing what they'd broken. This isn't punishment, Michael clarified. This is restoration. You're learning that mistakes can be fixed if you're willing to do the work. You're learning that you had the capability to build and repair, not just destroy. That's a lesson that goes beyond fixing a car. T-Bone and Derek were assigned to the community center renovation project. A counselor named Patricia, a former Army engineer, took them to see the space. A large room with water-damaged walls, outdated fixtures, and worn flooring. This will be our new youth center, Patricia explained. A place for at-risk kids to come after school. Safe space, mentorship, activities. But it needs work. Lots of work. That's where you two come in. Derek looked around the space, his contractor's eye assessing the job. This is months of work. Yes, which means months of purpose, months of showing up for something bigger than yourselves. You up for it? T-Bone and Derek exchanged glances, then nodded. The 4 men broke for lunch in the center's cafeteria. The food was simple but good, prepared by volunteers. As they ate, other veterans came by, introducing themselves, sharing brief versions of their own stories. Each one was different, but they all had common threads: struggle, hitting bottom, finding help, choosing change.
A veteran named Carlos, who couldn't have been more than 30, told them he'd been homeless 2 years ago. Heroin, he said simply. Lost everything. Family, job, my apartment, was living under a bridge. The colonel found me there one night, brought me here. I've been clean 18 months now. I work as a peer counselor. I have my own place again. And last month, my sister let me see my nieces for the first time in 3 years. An older veteran named Thompson talked about his anger issues after returning from Vietnam. 40 years I struggled, he said. Pushed away everyone who tried to help. Finally came here at 63 years old thinking it was too late. But it's never too late. I've got a relationship with my daughter now. Got to meet my grandkids. Don't have much time left probably, but the time I've got is good time now. Story after story, life after life changed not through dramatic intervention, but through consistent work, honest assessment, and supported growth. By mid-afternoon, the 4 men were exhausted, not from physical labor, though Troy and Steve had begun the initial assessment of the car repairs, but from emotional processing. Years of avoiding difficult truths had been compressed into one long morning of facing them head-on. Michael gathered them before they left. Today was the easy part, he said, and they looked at him in disbelief. I'm serious. Today was showing up, which takes courage, but is still just one decision. Tomorrow you have to show up again, and the day after that, and the day after that. The hard part isn't starting. The hard part is continuing when the novelty wears off, when you're tired, when you have a bad day, and old patterns call to you. How do we do that? Troy asked. How do we keep choosing the hard path when everything in us wants to go back to what's familiar? You don't do it alone, Hawk answered. You've got phone numbers now, mine, the Colonel's, the other counselors, your fellow participants. When you're struggling, you reach out. When you're tempted to quit, you call. When you start thinking you can't do this, you come here and talk to someone who's been where you are and made it through. Michael pulled out his wallet and extracted 4 business cards, not the center's cards, his personal cards, with his cell phone number. You can call me any time, he said, handing one to each man. 3 in the morning, you're craving a drink, you call. Noon on a Tuesday, you're thinking about skipping your counseling appointment, you call. This isn't a 9-to-5 commitment. This is a life commitment. I'm invested in your success now, which means I'm available when you need me. Steve looked at the card with something like wonder. Last night you were just an Uber driver. Now I don't even know what you are. A counselor? A mentor? I'm someone who understands what it's like to be at a crossroads. Someone who had help when he needed it and is paying that forward. That's all any of us are here. People who've been helped, helping others. The 4 men left together, a tentative comradeship forming between them. Not friendship yet, but the beginning of something. Shared experience, shared commitment, shared understanding that they were in this together. Michael and Hawk stood in the parking lot watching them drive away. Think they'll make it? Hawk asked. At least 2 of them will. Maybe 3. Troy and Derek for sure. They've hit their bottom and they know it. Steve and T-Bone are less certain. T-Bone is still figuring out how bad his depression is, and Steve is younger, still thinks he might be able to handle things on his own. But we'll see. And the ones who don't make it? Michael's face was somber. We plant seeds. Sometimes they grow immediately. Sometimes they lay dormant for years. I've had men come back after failing, after hitting an even lower bottom, ready to try again. The door stays open, always. They walked back inside, where more work awaited. 3 new referrals had come in that day. A veteran struggling with PTSD, a former gang member trying to leave that life, a young man whose father had called in desperation after finding drugs in his son's room. The work never stopped, the need never stopped, but neither did the hope. That evening, as Michael drove home in a rental car while his Camry was being repaired, his phone buzzed. A text from Troy. Made it through day 1, see it tomorrow. Then Steve, thanks for today, it helped. Then Derek, I measured the youth center room, gonna drop a renovation plan tonight. Give me something to do besides think. Then T-Bone, first therapy appointment is Tuesday. I'm scared, but I'm going. Michael smiled, setting his phone down. 4 texts. 4 men choosing, at least for today, the hard path. Tomorrow they'd have to choose again, and the day after that. But tonight they were choosing right. He thought about Colonel Hayes again, about the lesson that had transformed his life 20 years ago. Real strength is restraint. Real courage is choosing the harder path. Real leadership is transformation, not destruction. The lesson had been passed down. From Hayes to Michael, from Michael to Hawk and Jason, and now perhaps from all of them to 4 young men who'd been heading toward disaster, but had been given a chance to change course. The cycle continued. The work continued. And somewhere in Chicago, in homes and apartments and quiet rooms, 4 men were looking at themselves in mirrors, seeing not who they had been, but who they might become. That was enough. That was everything. The youth center opened on a Saturday in May. The space that had been water damaged and decrepit 6 months ago was now bright and welcoming. Fresh paint, new floors, renovated bathrooms, a computer lab, a reading room, and a gym. Every inch of it built or repaired by veterans and by the young men in the transformation program. Derek stood near the entrance, greeting visitors. He'd been promoted to project manager 3 months ago, overseeing renovations not just for this center, but for 2 others the Veterans Association was planning. His contractor skills, dormant for years, had flourished when given purpose and direction. T-Bone was in the gym, demonstrating proper form on the weight equipment to a group of teenagers. His depression, finally being treated properly with both therapy and medication, had lifted enough that he discovered something. He was good with kids. Patient, understanding. He'd started taking classes in youth counseling and was already talking about going back to school for a degree. Steve worked the registration table, signing kids up for programs. He'd completed his community service hours within 3 months, but he'd kept coming to the center anyway. He'd gotten a job at an auto parts store, steady work that paid the bills, but his real passion had become the center. He volunteered 20 hours a week and was considering joining the staff full-time. Troy stood with Michael, watching the chaos of the grand opening with satisfaction. He'd finished repairing Michael's car 4 months ago, and the work had been so good that the body shop had offered him a position. He'd discovered he had a talent for it. The precision, the problem-solving, the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole again. But more than that, Troy had discovered sobriety. The first 3 months had been brutal, filled with cravings and setbacks. He'd called Michael 17 times at various hours, always on the edge of drinking, always talking himself back from that edge with Michael's help. But he'd made it, 6 months sober, 6 months of choosing the hard path every single day. "Marcus came today," Troy told Michael, nodding toward his friend who was helping set up chairs in the meeting hall. "He's thinking about joining the program, not because he's in crisis, but because he wants to be part of this, wants to help." Michael smiled. The best time to build a strong foundation is before you need one. Good for him. Hawk approached with a young woman in tow, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune doing the story on the Veterans Association and its transformation program. She wanted to interview Michael, wanted to tell the story of the program's success. Michael had agreed, reluctantly. He didn't like attention, didn't want recognition. But Hawk had convinced him that the story could help, could bring in donations, could reach other young men who needed help, could show the community that change was possible. The reporter asked about the program's origins, about its success rate, about the philosophy behind it. Michael answered carefully, always deflecting credit to the team, to the veterans who volunteered their time, to the young men who did the hard work of changing. "But there must be a moment," the reporter pressed, "a moment when you knew this program was really working, when you knew all the effort was worth it." Michael thought for a long moment, looking around the crowded youth center. At Derek greeting families, at T-Bone teaching teenagers, at Steve managing logistics, at Troy standing tall and sober and purposeful. There wasn't one moment. There were 1,000 small moments. Every time a phone rang at 3 a.m. and someone was calling for help instead of reaching for a bottle. Every time someone showed up when it would have been easier to stay home. Every time someone chose to be honest about their struggles instead of pretending everything was fine. Those moments, those tiny choices, that's when I knew it was working. The reporter scribbled notes. "And what about the young men who don't make it? The program has about a 60% success rate?" "It's 62%, Hawk corrected. But we don't see the others as failures. Change isn't linear. Some men need to try multiple times before it sticks. Some need to hit a harder bottom before they're ready. We keep the door open, always." "And speaking of which," the reporter said, checking her notes, "I understand the program started with a rather dramatic incident, an Uber ride that went wrong." Michael and Troy exchanged glances. They'd never told that story publicly, though it had become something of a legend within the veterans community. It started with 4 young men making bad choices, and it became an opportunity for them to make better ones. That's the short version. Troy stepped forward. "Can I tell it? The real version?" Michael nodded. Troy took a deep breath and told the reporter everything. About being drunk and aggressive, about surrounding Michael's car with intent to hurt him, about the concrete in his hand and the tire iron and the rage that was driving him, about the phone call that changed everything, about 30 veterans arriving and teaching a lesson about real strength. I was ready to put concrete through that man's windshield. I was ready to hurt him, maybe seriously. And instead of calling the police, instead of pressing charges, instead of doing what any reasonable person would do, he offered to help me, offered to help all of us. The reporter was writing furiously. That's extraordinary. Most people would want a justice, punishment. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes justice is about restoration, about taking something broken and making it whole again. That applies to cars and to people. The grand opening continued throughout the day. Families toured the facility, kids signed up for programs, community leaders gave speeches about the importance of supporting at-risk youth. It was exactly what the neighborhood needed, what the Veterans Association had been working toward for years. As the sun began to set and the crowd thinned, the core team gathered in the renovated space. Michael, Hawk, Jason, Patricia, and a dozen other veterans who'd poured their time and energy into making this happen. And Troy, Steve, Derek, and T-Bone, no longer just participants in a program, but part of the team itself. "I want to say something," Troy announced, his voice carrying across the room. 6 months ago, I was at the lowest point in my life. I was angry, drunk, violent, and heading for prison or death. I thought I was tough. I thought aggression was strength. I thought the world owed me something. He looked directly at Michael. Then I met a man who showed me what real strength looks like, what real courage looks like, what it means to be a leader, a teacher, a person worth respecting. And he did it not by beating me down, but by lifting me up, by believing I could change when I didn't believe it myself. Troy's voice broke slightly. "I can't ever repay what you did for me that night, what you've done for me every day since, but I can pay it forward. I'm going to be for someone else what you were for me. That's what I'm committing to, right here, right now. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the kind of man that makes the world better, not worse." The room was silent. Then Hawk started clapping, slow and deliberate. Others joined in until the applause filled the space. Michael stepped forward and embraced Troy. No words needed. The transformation spoke for itself. As people began to leave, as the lights were turned off and doors were locked, Michael stood alone for a moment in the center of the renovated space. He thought about the journey that had led here, about Colonel Hayes 20 years ago, about the lesson that had saved his life and was now saving others. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Is this Michael Rodriguez? I got your number from a friend. I need help." Michael smiled and typed back, "Tell me where you are. We're on our way." The work never stopped. The need never stopped. But neither did the hope, the possibility, the fundamental belief that people could change if someone believed in them first. Outside, Troy and his friends were loading supplies into trucks. They were laughing about something, the easy camaraderie of people who'd been through hell together and come out stronger. Michael joined them, and together they drove into the evening towards another person who needed help, another opportunity to transform darkness into light. The Midnight Fair had become a lifetime commitment. And Michael Rodriguez, former lieutenant colonel, former warrior, current Uber driver and mentor, wouldn't have had it any other way. Real strength was restraint. Real courage was choosing the harder path. Real leadership was transformation, not destruction. Colonel Hayes had been right all along.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.